Katie, you all set to record?
Yes, sir.
Recording in progress.
Being recorded.
Good evening. My name is Peter Basserman. I am chairman of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. I'll now open the commission's regular monthly meeting of December 12th, 2024. It's now 7 o'clock. This evening's meeting will be conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with the Connecticut Public Act 22.3. It's being held with documents referenced at the meeting available at the town hall or via the agency's webpage. Final agenda for today's meeting was filed yesterday, December 11th, and is also on the town's website. Does the staff have any changes to the agenda this evening?
No.
A few administrative details before commencing tonight's meeting. First, to provide public exposure, Branford Community Television will be recording and broadcasting tonight's meeting. We're thankful for their participation, and the public can view the recording on the appropriate cable TV channel. As participants in the evening's proceeding, please be conscious of positioning your camera so that your face is visible on the recording, especially when speaking. Second, to ensure an accurate and complete record of discussions, each time a statement or a comment is made during tonight's meeting, the party speaking must announce his or her name before articulating any comment. This applies to any party wishing to participate. Those wishing to speak may use the raise your hand feature to indicate that desire, and staff will continue to assist in identifying those wishing to speak. Once the meeting is begun, please mute your microphone if not speaking. This will prevent feedback from distorting communications. And I guess I'll take a roll call now for the commission and staff. When I announce your name, please indicate by saying present. Let's see, Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, present.
Commissioner Papantonis.
Commissioner Papantonis present.
Commissioner Meinson.
Commissioner Meinson, present.
Commissioner Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, present.
Staff, Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Director and Enforcement Officer.
Present.
Katie Blanchett, Inland Wetland Associate.
Present.
All right, so the commissioners are seated and able to vote. Per our regulations, up to 7 commissioners may vote on an issue. Does any commissioner have comments that they would like to add to the record at this point? Let's see.
This is Commissioner Boda. Just really quickly, I noticed that the TV packet is from 2024, and I had some additional credentials that were added, including that I'm certified to teach. Oh no, never mind. It's here. I take it back. That's okay.
Commissioner Meinson, regarding the public hearing this evening, did you get a chance to review the recording from our previous meeting?
Yes, Commissioner Meinson.
Thank you. Let's see. To manage this evening's agenda, I'm going to ask that a 2-hour limit be imposed for the public hearing. If the window is not sufficient to conclude the hearing, I will ask the commission to continue that public hearing to our next regularly scheduled meeting in January. To that point, I would appreciate if the applicant's comments were presented within a 90-minute window. Therefore, a brief review by the peer review team can follow and still work within that 2-hour time frame. I will now reopen Inland Wetland 240902, which is Beacon Hill and age-restricted housing development.
Minutes.
Oh, do we? Oh, you're right. We didn't do minutes yet. Okay, we have minutes from November 14th, 2024.
This is Commissioner Boda. There are a few points that I think from the public hearing that weren't captured in the minutes. I know that the minutes are not meant to be exhaustive as there's a recording of the meeting, but there were a couple of items that I wanted to make sure were captured. Katie, you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Just go slow.
Sure. So near the end of the discussion, Attorney Lee asserted that there is an environmental benefit proposed, part of the proposal because of the sewers. And I indicated to him that that's not part of their record. And as an attorney, it's not for him to say. And if they wish to make that argument, there needs to be a finding of fact on the record for that to be considered as part of the application. We also talked about a need for an alternative analysis without building 4. Let me know when I can go ahead. I have one more.
Yeah, we're good.
Did you say go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then Mr. Rima, near the end of the minutes here, it's noted in the minutes that he talked about the wetlands and that a portion of the wetlands are man-made and that they have little function or value. And there was discussion that the state of Connecticut does not include distinction between how we treat different types of wetland. And so that should also be part of the record.
Okay, I'll make those changes and send them back to you for January.
Yeah. Okay, so we have tabled the approval of those minutes until our January meeting. And that now being conducted, let's turn this over to the applicant for public hearing, Inland Wetland 240902, Beacon Hill, and age-restricted housing development.
Amy Frederick and the wetland agent, if I may, real quick. I just want to identify that there have been materials received in the last couple of days, including some public comment. And it looks like we may have members of the public here this evening. So in regards to that 2-hour window you were talking about earlier, we want to make sure that there's potentially some time available for members of the public to speak as well. And with that being said, I will hand it over to the applicant.
One more thing before we do that. Jamie, so that everyone's on the same page, can you go over the timeline associated with what we
Yes,
are
that is a good point.
dealing
There was
with
one
today?
other point I wanted to make, and that is that the public hearing does have to close this evening unless the applicant consents to an extension of the time to keep the public hearing open, which there are 65 days available. I see that Commissioner Ormrod has his hand raised. He is now present at the meeting. I'm guessing he's saying that he's recusing himself from this item.
Yeah, hi, Matt Ormrod, Commissioner. Yeah, Jamie, thank you. I missed roll call. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties on my end. But yes, I will remain recused from this application, and we'll work on my internet issues in the meantime. So thank you.
Okay, with that, anything else on the timeline, Jamie?
After the public hearing is closed, the commission has 35 days to deliberate and make a decision regarding the application.
Okay, with all that administrative out of the way, I turn it over to the applicant who wants to take the baton.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Timothy Lee on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight is Zach Georgina from Giuliano Associates. He's the project engineer, and George Logan from Rima Ecological. He is our soil scientist. Just as a preliminary matter, when we were here last month, you had indicated that the individual from CLA would only be here until 8 o'clock, but I understand from your statement tonight that we have until 9 o'clock with the peer review team. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
Jamie, am I speaking with forked tongue there or not?
I believe that their time restraints have been lifted and that they can be here until 9.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure before we shoot up too much of the clock. When we were here last time, we did present the application in full. As the chair noted, there were some questions, some of the questions related to the feasible and prudent alternatives. We're happy to address that. There were also some questions regarding the wetlands mitigation and restoration. Since we met last time, we have supplemented our application with new mitigation and restoration plans. We also had Zach take a look at the site plan to see if there are any tweaks he could make. He has also been in contact with the town engineer regarding the drainage calculations and things along those lines. From my understanding of the comments from the town engineer, at least from an engineering perspective, he had satisfied the questions and concerns of the town engineer. I can certainly have George Logan testify or make a presentation regarding the changes he has made to the wetlands mitigation and planting plan. I do recall the discussion with Commissioner Botha last time regarding the benefits of a sewer system as opposed to a septic system. When George makes his presentation, I would ask George to comment in his professional capacity regarding the impact that a failing septic system could have on wetlands, in particular, the impact that nitrogen could have on the wetlands. So if the commission would like, we can proceed first with George discussing the changes to the mitigation and restoration plan and also having him comment on the benefit of the sewer system as opposed to the septic system.
Good evening, George Logan for the record, Rema Ecological Services. I think it'd probably be best if Zach showed the plans that show the actual changes to the plans with regards to mitigation or any other matter, and then I could jump on that after. I don't know if Zach can hear me.
I can indeed hear you, George. Zach Georgina, Giuliano Associates. I did offer a share request. I do not have permission to share my screen currently.
I'm working on it. I don't think that request worked. I have to do it differently.
Got it. Okay, I want screen 2. Share. Okay, so we should all be able to see my screen if I can just get a confirmation from that. Cool.
Good to go.
All right. So in terms of what George is going to be presenting on, the major change here is Jamie had made some comments previously about what should be included as a permanent and a temporary impact. To that point, the southern impact is now expanded. There's a section here we were saying county is being remediated. It is no longer going to be restored. Considered that. So this is now all permanent impact in the southern wetlands in that orange section. Where we're really doing our heavy lifting here in terms of meeting the 2-to-1, improving our wetlands functionality and giving back on this whole project is this purple field over here with the northern wetlands. As we had previously proposed with reforming in here to allow it to better function in terms of handling the storm load from the contributing watershed. We had these 2 expanded wetlands we were looking to construct, as well as this temporary impact and restoration effort in blue. What we are proposing additionally is this wetland enhancement, which is this area in purple. George can go more into the depth of construction of that itself, but that is really the meat and potatoes of where we're looking at here in terms of increasing the wetlands enhancements. If we go over here to the calculations, modification to the numbers based on the discussions with town staff, we are now at a total impact areas that's still that 9,637. There's been a little bit of a shift between what is temporary and what is permanent, but we're still at that 9,673. And then with this 4,400 square foot wetlands enhancement, we're looking to do to actually remove garbage, remove invasives, plants, wetland species, and really restore and improve the functionality of these wetlands. We're going to be able to get our mitigation total up to north of 19,000 square feet worth of mitigation. And this has nothing to do with the detention basin for stormwater, where that's completely off the table. So this is pure, straight wetlands creation, and wetlands enhancement and restoration. And that's actually going to get us to that 2-to-1 ratio that had been discussed so heavily at the last meeting. So that's really what we're looking at here. George, is there anything specifically you'd like me to be looking at while you do your presentation?
Yeah, take us back to that enhancement area so that I
Yep.
can explain what we're doing here. And with that, I'm going to probably, again, George Logan for the record, dovetail one of the last questions in the previous CLA memo that had remained to be explained. And it is kind of has to do with this wetland. So a little bit of history on this wetland is that, and you'll see later on as we presenting a little more information on the alternative analysis, is that we had a building that squarely sat pretty much where building 4 and that expansion of the wetland was. And the removal of that building and the grading that was done there, and then the overflow of water from this particular wetland created that little orange area that we delineated with Mr. Russo a few months ago. Now, as you probably have heard and you've read in my reports and seen pictures, the core of this wetland, and so the lower portions of this wetland are a very dense infestation of common reed, Phragmites. And the thing that I got thinking about it, because I looked at the aerial photographs and I couldn't see the photographic signature Phragmites until after the full development of this parcel had taken place with the building that I just described. And I think what happened at that time was that the hydrology of this wetland was altered. How was it altered? It was basically made wetter. That disturbance probably precipitated in a change of vegetation where woody vegetation couldn't make it anymore. And the Phragmites, which is tolerant of up to a foot of water in general, came in and populated this disturbance and then spread out. So that's kind of one thing that I got thinking about it. Now, one of the questions that have been asked by the third-party review, and specifically Mr. Russo, was what's going to happen here in this wetland since we're providing some clean water, but yet additional water that's going to raise the level of the water for several hours during storm events before it's released through the piping system downstream. And I got thinking of that. And the issue here is, first of all, this has been created by an altered hydrology already. So what happens if you maybe alter the hydrology again? Well, what's going to probably happen is that the Phragmites is not going to tolerate it. They have a tolerance. They much more than certainly than woody vegetation, which has been eliminated. So what's going to happen there is you're going to have a little more water, and either the Phragmites is going to get stressed, and that stress is going to probably allow for the next native vegetation that's tolerant of this kind of situation, that's all over the environment, and I see that happening, and that is cattail. That's a native species, and so you might end up having pockets of cattail marsh that are going to potentially invade here and there. And you see that, and I see that in natural systems that are infested by Phragmites, where the lower spots are, you have the cattail, where the higher spots are, you have the Phragmites. And you can see that not only in freshwater systems, you can see it in tidal systems, brackish, for instance. So what we thought that we could do in this particular situation is when we're doing the work to lower the ground in the green areas that you see there, we could reach out to the purple areas. That's probably about 20 feet or so, would you say? Maybe 25 feet, Zach?
I kept it under 25 feet. I believe it's on average 21 to 22 feet.
Which is kind of the average reach of an excavator. So what could happen here is we could remove some of the wetland soil, if you will, which is Phragmites infested. That would have to be removed off-site and deposited in a proper manner according to DEP protocols, which that has to go to specific landfill. You probably know that. And that will create, and the excavation we're talking about here is in the order of a foot to maybe a foot and a half, 18 inches additional. And that will create an environment which Phragmites can't tolerate because it's a little deeper. Since we know where the level of vegetation or the water levels are going to be, because there's sort of an engineering component to that. And that will allow us to put in plant materials of a deep marsh. And I have revised the planting tables to include many of those. One plant that I didn't think to include, now that I'm thinking of it, could have been right at the edge, would be buttonbush, because that's a true aquatic species that tolerates more than a foot of water on average. So that could be something that could be added. But you're looking at soft stem bulrush, you're looking at arrow arum, you're looking at sparganium or boerweed, things like that. They're like what you would see in a deep marsh rather than a shallow marsh, which is the situation here. So that would definitely be an enhancement, and it would also increase the ability of this habitat for amphibian breeding, because right now there might be a pocket here and there, but it's choked up by Phragmites. So that would allow for a clear area for amphibians, especially anurans, frogs, to be able to populate that. So that's the discussion, and the notes have been revised to reflect this and some of the other things that we heard. All the tables have been revised, and the only difference, apart from what you see here, is that we took all the plants out, and there's just a seed mix from the detention basin. So you can see, and of course I have landscaping plans that I've populated, which also was submitted. You might have seen them before. So those have been redone. So there's nothing happening within the detention basin except for a specialized seed mix for the bottom. Now, the other thing that I want to discuss quickly, since we're still in the mitigation component, we got an additional memo from CLA that's dated yesterday, December 12th. And there was a couple of questions that had to do with the mitigation. These are new comments. One comment, which I think it's more for Zach, but I'll explain what it is. The comment is the wetland mitigation plans, notes, plant lists, and details prepared by REMA should be incorporated in the final site plan set, which obviously that's very reasonable. Number two, item 1 of REMA's mitigation plan implementation notes call for 10 wetland mitigation locations. And these should be identified on the plans. And I think we might have done that on this plan. You can see, for instance, that there are restoration area 3, proposed wetlands creation C, etc. So those have been, and I think the only one that's called the proposed wetland enhancement one is the additional one that we had. We had 9 areas, now we have 10. I think that's it, and Zach will correct me if I'm wrong. So yes, certainly those can be labeled a little better if that's necessary, especially for the planting plans that are produced. Number 3, this is one, REMA's wetland creation restoration enhancement plans, 2 sheets, one north and one south, show plantings in moderately well-drained soils, which are not wetland soils. Please clarify if these areas were included in the calculation of square footage of the wetland mitigation we provided. The answer is no. The reason for planting in the moderately well-drained soils, which surround these areas, is clear that I want to produce a sort of a buffer, a planting buffer. So especially behind building 4, that is very much populated with plants of moderately well-drained soils, because there is a slope there, as you probably remember. And so there's there's bayberries, there's cedars, there's things like that that are put in that area. Here we go. So that's that slope that you see from 86 and coming up, elevation 86. And the fourth question regarding mitigation was a separate stockpile location for wetland soil should be shown on the plans, and I'm sure we could accommodate that. And as I mentioned, all the substrates that we're going to be excavating cannot be used back in the creation areas because obviously they're infested with wetland plants, especially the Phragmites, and we don't want to be chasing our tail going after Phragmites for years to come. Now I will pivot to quickly deal with a couple of more issues, and if there are more, certainly I'm not going anywhere.
Mr. Rima, can you just pause for a second and stay with that mitigation? Just one question for you. You talked about the removing of the frag and then digging down and digging out. I think you said a foot to 18 inches.
That's correct.
So is then can you talk a little bit more about then the substrate? Is the intention to leave what's there? Is the intention to bring in some kind of soil that already has some microbiology already happening? Can you talk a little bit more in detail about that? And if you have intention of creating any little micro topography in that process?
Certainly, that can be included, and it's a good question. Now, as you remove the substrate that's there now in order to create a semi-permanent hydrologic regime. So right now you have a seasonally flooded or temporary flooded, and now the purple area will be a semi-permanent. So that will have water most of the time, which is what you want for a deep marsh. I fully expect that once you get down and remove the 12 inches to 18 inches of what's there now, that you're down in a sandy substrate. Most of the plants that we are proposing actually can grow in sandy substrate with not a lot of topsoil. How do I know that? Because I see them all the time at the edges of ponds and at the edges of streams, low gradient streams, where there's not a lot of subsoil, topsoil, and there's sand and some organics and maybe not. I think your point is well taken, that the thing that we will probably want to do is to carefully, in the areas that we will be planting, and those are going to be probably clumps that are going to be going along the perimeter, because we're not going to necessarily go in and plant at the far end of 25 or 20 feet. So what we want to do is to plant close to the perimeter where it can be reached, where the plants can be secured, and then there will be an expansion. As you know, plants like soft stem bulrush, they're clonal. They expand greatly. Boerweed does the same thing. Most of these plants do it. So yeah, that's a good point. I think I might have put it in the notes. I'm not sure that we would introduce where we're planting in the planting beds some organic material and not the typical topsoil, because this is going to be a wetted situation. So we might have to get a mix of compost and topsoil. So you have something in the order of, say, 15% organic matter incorporated, and that's what we were planting. Now what I'm going to be doing. So that's a good question. So the planting scheme is mostly, for some plants we use propagules, and you're probably familiar with that. They come in little peat pots. They're not particularly big, and you can plant them. If they're in water, you have to weigh them down. Usually, we'll use a methodology to weigh them down or to secure them so they don't float back up until they can expand. But my guess is that for some of these plants, we're going to go with something bigger than propagules. And so there are a few suppliers in Connecticut, and usually they're the suppliers that go for the landscaping plans where people want to have a nice little aquatic pool in the back. And believe it or not, there's one actually in Portland that I've used before. I forget their name, and they have, for instance, arum and arrowhead in pots, which is great. Why am I saying that? Because that pot has already enough soil to allow for these plants to expand. So you're already incorporating some soil there. So that's kind of what I'm envisioning. Does that answer your question?
Generally. So it sounds like you're now thinking, or you're thinking about that you would need to incorporate some additional organic matter,
Yeah.
And perhaps include some of those larger plants that can stay. So, but any micro topography would be along the edge.
The microtopography will be in the clumps that we would use. The idea here is not necessarily do microtopography in that area. Microtopography would be more akin to be done in the areas such as the restoration area that's in blue, if I'm reading that color right, or green. The way you do that, and this is something, and also you can bring in roughness elements. You're probably familiar with that. So what I'd be looking around in the site is to find logs or big branches that don't have any invasives associated with them, because that mistake has been made, and to basically randomly put them around in those areas which are going to be more seasonally flooded rather than semi-permanently flooded. And now, as far as microtopography, the other thing you do is when we're out there, and when I'm talking microtopography, we're talking something in the area where you basically come in with your excavator, your mini, probably going to be using a mini here, and you take a scoop of soil and you basically flop it on the side. So now you have something that's a foot above the grade and a foot below the grade. So that's kind of what we do with it. We kind of sculpture it a little bit. And we've definitely done that in many cases before. And that's a great idea. And thank you for bringing up that microtopography idea. I would have done it anyhow, but I didn't write in the notes.
Okay, so you'll incorporate those details that we just discussed into the plan?
Certainly.
Okay. You can go on to the next thing that you wanted to. Thanks for the
right. So
detail.
The one thing I know that you were correct in the fact, Ms. Boda, that you said that the preamble of the Wetlands Act does not specify that some wetlands are less valuable than other wetlands. It's because it talks about generally the functions and values of wetlands. But the interesting part is that your regulations, I believe, at least many of the regulations across Connecticut, require the applicant's wetland soil scientist to provide a functions and values analysis. And if you kind of back up into what that means, we use protocols or evaluation methodologies that actually rank different functions and values as being principal or secondary or absent. So that in itself tells you that there's differences in the way that certain wetlands provide more function than others. In the case that we have here, I would say with the exception of the northern wetland, all the other wetlands have low functionality. And the reason for that is because there's been a disturbance and proliferation of invasive species. So there is kind of a little bit of a ranking. Not all wetlands, unfortunately, are created equal. You have wetlands that are extremely valuable, and I'm thinking in my mind, calcareous seepage fens, true bogs, our brackish wetlands that we have down gradient in the tidal marshes, those kinds of things are much, much more valuable and functioning than, a drainage ditch that now has wetland characteristics. That's one thing. The other thing that I want to quickly describe is you mentioned correctly that someone like myself who has a level of expertise should be able to explain why going from from septic systems to sewers can be a good thing. It doesn't mean that has to be a good thing all the time. But here's the thing. We can talk about failing septic systems, so we can also talk about septic systems that are not particularly failing, but maybe are a little older in their technology. All septic systems, whether they're failing or not, do one thing that can be detrimental to the environment. And they introduce nitrate nitrogen, which is anthropogenic. There's not a lot of nitrate nitrogen that's in the environment because it's quickly taken up, right? So we know that. That's an essential nutrient. Plants will use it very, very quickly. But we know that septic systems introduce a lot of nitrogen into the environment, especially soluble forms, which have the ability to travel long distances. So what we know that's a fact. The other thing we know for a fact is the down gradient from this site, not too far away, a couple thousand feet, we have wetland systems that are tidal. They're extremely sensitive to the introduction of nitrogen. That's one of the nutrients that's the most detrimental for tidal, wetland systems. So the idea that we're going from septic systems that are close to tidal marshes, because those septic systems, not only in this area but even a little further down, as you see here from the road comes around, and there's a couple of houses down there that have septic systems. So that and those are very, very close to the tidal systems, as you see. So that will be a benefit in my estimation, to go from septic systems, whether they're failing or not, to a sewer system, which then can take the water, and then we have to, the state and the EPA take care of what has to happen with that water. But at least we don't have that introduction directly through groundwater into these systems. So that's kind of my quick synopsis on that matter.
And Mr. Logan, this is Commissioner Boda. Are you? Oh, that was helpful. I'm wondering if you're speaking generally about septic and the process of nitrogen mobility and nitrogen impacts in saltwater systems, or if you are speaking specifically to the location of the septic systems that are on site and their proximity to groundwater on the site. Do you see my question?
Sure. I think I'm speaking about both. The one thing that I can tell you that what I've heard, and this is not, I haven't gone and looked at the information to see how many septic systems we have here and where they are. My understanding is that this entire neighborhood is on septic systems. And so that's factor number one. Whether they're failing or not, I can't tell you because I haven't done that analysis. So I have two generalizations which I think are applicable here. One is failing systems or even non-failing systems can be detrimental to the environment, especially when you have the nexus of tidal marshes that are sensitive to it. As you probably know, most septic systems don't do any better than about a 40% reduction of nitrogen. And that seems to be generally across. There's some systems that are much, much more newer systems that can do a little better than that, up to 60%. So what I've seen is when you have a wetland, and I'm talking about freshwater or tidal wetlands, and you test the water and you find out that your nitrogen is usually not more than certainly not more than 1 milligram per liter. Typically, it's much less than that. I mean, I just did some testing for Pine Brook and East Hampton, even during a severe drought where limited water, so not a lot of dilution. And my nitrate nitrogen was 0.28 milligrams per liter. That's pretty low. So generally speaking, unaffected or not adversely affected systems have nitrogen levels that are pretty low. And now you're depending, and these are sandy soils, obviously, here as the closer you get to the tidal marshes. So you have the potential for 5, 6, 7 milligrams per liter of nitrogen to be introduced to the edge of these wetlands, and that can be detrimental. And one of the things that we're trying to do across the state is to mitigate for the effects of Phragmites. Phragmites loves nitrogen. So the more nitrogen you throw at them, the happier they are. And so that's another consideration.
Is Commissioner Batchman, any other mitigation comments from the commission or material that the applicant wishes to discuss?
No, Mr. Chair, I think that covers it as far as mitigation or restoration is concerned, unless the commission has any questions for either Mr. Logan or Mr. Giordina.
This is Commissioner Begemon. I just have a question. When you're removing all that 12 to 18 inches of topsoil, of whatever that is, partly wet soil or whatever, I'm assuming there are invertebrates. There's some. Can you just speak to what is removed? Living organisms that are removed that won't be replaced, because that seems to me that it'll be an impact.
Well, here's the thing. So these organisms that we're removing, and what are we talking about here? We're talking about some invertebrates, probably snails, scuds, the kind of, worms, those kinds of things that you find in topsoil, in wet topsoil in these situations. So yeah, that's removed, but it's going to very, very quickly colonize by what's adjacent to it, because these organisms are prolific and they will spread and take advantage of whatever they find there very, very quickly. So I'm really not concerned about that, because you already have a source which is going to recolonize those areas.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. One question I had that might be addressed now or later is erosion controls during this work, and how the adjacent wetland area will be protected and whether any dewatering will be necessary during the construction of this area.
That's a good question, Jamie, and I think we could take an extra look at that, but I expect that what's already on the plans as far as protecting this area, and actually, you remember all the water is running our way. So as far as soil escaping our areas, it's going to basically be where we're doing the work. However, the dewatering is another question. So we might have to do a little dewatering. So Zach could probably address what the typical dewatering practices would be and it also depends on the time of the year. And whether we're in a drought or not. So, Zach, you might want to address that. I see you have things going up already.
Yep. Pardon me. Typically, site plans and construction timing, and it is mentioned in the narrative. When site plan development wise has things that are in an upland review area or adjacent to a wetland, where we do our best to limit and time it to be during the Connecticut's dry season, which is going to be your towards the end of June through July and August is really when you want to be doing this work. Because that's statistically speaking when you're going to get the least amount of rainfall events, the least sustained water. So the driest situation possible. But to mitigate that, what we are proposing, water and sediment doesn't run uphill. It runs downhill. And our site luckily goes north to south, so it's easy to say everything coming from north, if people think of as up, is coming down. So when doing the work and creating our staging area, and before we start doing any of the filling to create our detention basin and whatnot, one of the things that we are proposing in the early phases here is to put in a stone-lined swale around the backside of where our construction area is, and have that coming up right to where the current low point in this northern wetland is. So essentially, to move this, it's been sized appropriately for up to the 10-year storm, which is what Connecticut best management practices recommend for temporary storm elements, which is what this is. We're just looking for when there's a rain event that comes in here that we're directing water around our construction site, initially speaking. This whole swale and water, everything north into the northern wetlands, this is undisturbed, so we're going to be getting water that's the same quality and treatment wise that's there today. That's going to be passed into, again, a stone lined swale, passing along through the backside of our site and connecting almost, I believe it's close to essentially 30 feet away from the existing wetlands to continue along its natural path that it's continuing. So that's during the initial phases, how we're looking to do this. When we finally have to crack the omelet that is the major earthwork in this area, what we're looking to do, come on, go to the next page. There we go. What we'd be looking to do is to build this essentially a twofold in reverse, where the first element is going to be to get laid down the 30-inch culvert going from where we're looking to have our outflow to where we're tying in. So lay that first, and then essentially build an initial berm here in height alongside. So as water is coming down, it is again being detained and then passing through the culvert like we're looking to do in the long run anyway. Once this berm has been initially built enough that we can still get in here, but water is being directed through the culvert to function as intended, we then get into the element of doing the work in this area. Typically speaking, and this is town to town in terms of the recommendations here, if we're working on a downhill wetland, installing a silt fence 3 feet beyond the limit, 4 feet beyond the limit, it creates essentially an additional disturbance of a foot and a half to 2 feet by 2 feet in terms of the soil, where we have to actually dig soil to put the silt fence in, put the back soil on, and it's really just a for show element, because again, water doesn't flow uphill. So in this situation, what we're really looking to do here is when we build this and create our depression for the proposed mitigation and wetlands creations we're doing here, we're keeping the grade lower than the northern wetland. So we're not going to be seeing silts and fines migrating uphill into this. We are proposing, as soon as this culvert gets in, to install a sed jacket, which I've included a detail. Essentially, it is a rebar and silt fence, or a filter fabric material insert that you would put the culvert in. You put this in. A couple of sandbags are inserted in there to make sure this is locked in place. And so for smaller storm events, water interacts with this just like it would a silt fence, where if there's any sediments or soils being deposited from the work we're doing in the downhill side of the northern wetland, it would be building up and filtered against the said jack, just like a silt fence would. So obviously after the storm, we get out there, remove this silt, and find that if anything had been built up, and correct any modified grading. Larger storm events, then obviously you get to a point where you would have an overtopping into this, just like a silt fence for your larger storm events, but this does maintain a good filtering for, again, up to that 10-year storm, which is what we're looking for best management practices to really make sure that we're containing the silts and fines. Anything larger than that storm-wise, and this is just facts of development, there is no amount of silt fencing and straw bales being put on a site at a perimeter that's going to contain a 100-year storm. That's not how development is capable to be done. And that goes for this site or any site, but that's why specifically Connecticut, all of these things are sized. The temporary sediment traps that we're proposing installing here, these are all sized for that 10-year storm event to be able to handle and address that. And that's most average storms you see are during the summer range in that 2 to 5 year. Larger storms are in that 2 to 5 year zone. 10-year storms a little bit above that. And I do know that the most recent year in Connecticut, we can all admit there's been some good storm events. But again, the intent of all of these is when doing these during the summer and monitoring the weather during these crucial weather events, we know storms are coming. When you see that they're 5 to 10 days out, a responsible developer is going to sit there and make sure all of their sediment controls are in to the best extent possible. And I think that addresses the northern wetland. Going into what we're going to, as we continue to build up, how that we are going to protect the southern wetland. The goal is to get the basin in and constructed first. It's going to provide us a fairly decent physical land barrier for sediments getting from construction site passing beyond. But we are looking to install some straw bale reinforced silt fence along the temporarily through the wetland that we're looking to be doing some enhancements to south of this. Silt fence along the toe of the slope to stop water as soon as we're hitting the bottom off the 3-to-1 slope for the detention basin itself. Interiorly, we want to protect that sand filter. So again, ringing that in silt fence that'll allow water to get to the sand filter, but stop sediments from interacting with that and clogging up that sand filter. And then silt fence being run along the uphill side of the downhill end of this land bridge, so that we're containing anything that's on this upper area that would be trying to mitigate down towards where we've already been working in establishing our wetlands mitigation areas. Keep that up on top of the berm. The couple of larger filling areas like this, when being constructed, one of the things that developers need to be cognizant of, thank you, is that the center needs to remain the low point. And that's going to prevent a lot of water hitting there, being able to pick up speed and velocity and try to escape. If you keep this low center naturally bold the whole time you build up, water that falls on this disturbed area that's being compacted and raised up, it runs to the center and is held until it infiltrates. And that's really the design here is around keeping water where it is or keeping it flowing as naturally as possible to bypass or work around disturbed areas, so that we're not having flows from the northern wetland pick up soils as they go through the the center area and bring those soils along and further down past the site, is to get them to bypass around that area and not even have that interaction.
And this is Commissioner Boda, you said in that center area, keeping it bowed so that the sediments don't run off, but rather infiltrate. What kind of soils were here that would allow for infiltration?
So at this point, this is going to be compacted fill. All soils eventually will infiltrate, unless you have a solid clay, and even then, given enough time, water will infiltrate. And so in terms of a dewatering situation where, let's say, you're absolutely right, this is compacted, we're not seeing good infiltration, there was a storm, it's 2 days later, it's still full of water. Typically what you would end up seeing, and I believe was included in one of the later sheets at request, we have a dewatering narrative, and then the best management practice outlines exactly various approaches to do this, but typically what you end up seeing, contractors either using a temporary sediment bag. So essentially we attach a bag to the end of a pump, we take water, put one end of the pump into the water, pump that through the filter bag, and we put that on a not disturbed area. So as water's pumping out, it's being released by that bag in all directions on a fairly level surface that isn't disturbed, with the sediments being trapped inside that bag. Much like a catch basin insert would catch all the sediments being entered into a catch basin before allowing it to pass through, to pump that area dry. Once that area was dry, obviously then construction could continue maintaining that same thing. We'd have the potential for that same if we were not seeing any infiltration, while we continue to build that up until we've got it to topsoil and seeded, in which case it's no longer a concern.
Amy Frederick, the wetland agent. I want to jump back real quick to that dewatering question. So you showed the dewatering for phase 1. Do you anticipate there being any dewatering during the wetland mitigation enhancement activity? Or if it's wet, is it something that you can excavate with ponded water, because that edge of the wetland did have standing water when it was being looked at in July this past summer.
So, in a bit of a unique situation, my office typically a lot of our projects we're hired to do both the surveying and engineering element of it. We were not the surveyors in this particular project, but I was out here essentially doing a site walk, and when I was out here in May, the northern wetland was dry. I didn't see any water in it. The situation where, May of 2023, when I was out here doing a site walk, and the wetland was dry. Now, I know that when the commission was out there and when Mr. Logan and Fred Rousseau were out there, there had been storm events within 24 hours of the walking. So I expected that the wetlands would have water in them when you guys were out and about. But in a situation like that, excavation, the two options are you either, when you're stockpiling your moist material that you would essentially scoop out and stockpile, it's let to sit there until the water runs out. And again, any sort of dewatering stockpile needs to be very closely monitored and ringed and silt fenced so that you're not having, a scoop of slop that would go and be dropped in there, run out and cause its own S&E issue. So by putting it into a dewatering ring, you get that containment. In terms of dewatering, if there was a low water event, again, that dewatering narrative, a similar process would be followed. When you would have internal groundwater, you would be using either a type 1 or type 2 settling basin, preferably. If there was a storm caused it to fill up, you could probably get away with a filter bag setup again. But a similar process that you would pump the water out downhill so that it would fairly level and run away from where you're actively working while being contained within those filter medians. Any that address your concern?
I think so, unless the commission feels that it needs to be further explained, specifically relevant to the wetland area on the site plans.
This is Commissioner Bodo. When relative to the phasing and the development of buildings, when is the mitigated area proposed to be completed?
Phase 2. So the intent here is, phase 1 is essentially establishing the site, clearing the first area to the northeast in terms of trees, grubs, what have you, grubbing the site and remove roots, what have you. Phase 2 is really where we start to see more of the earthwork. And in phase 2, once we establish and we're down here building the basin, when we've already been down here and disturbing, that's really when we need to be looking at getting the grading and as much elements of that wetland area completed as possible. I understand that the plantings themselves with the species needs to be done. In this case, it would be the fall because we would be trying to do this construction during the dry season, which is the summer. But we're looking phase 2 to have all of these wetlands essentially grade-wise, and any sort of grass, general seed planted at this point so that we maximize the growing time before the fall and any sort of further plantings go in. It also gives us the chance as while we continue to do the development, guys are on site and monitoring the health of the wetland, and during that monitoring period, it's all right there. So if things are going awry, George is going to be around still, versus a lot of times with these 5-year monitoring programs that they do the wetlands last, what level of attention they're actually getting during the initial growing and establishment is always an area of concern. So by doing this and getting this established as quickly as possible, we're giving it the largest chance of being actively monitored while we're doing construction in other areas. So, and not redisturbing slopes that we've already stabilized to do the plantings.
So you're asserting that after the clearing and grubbing, the beginning of phase 2, you would work on the wetland grading and general seeding, and this would happen before buildings?
Correct.
Okay.
Before buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, since we're on the erosion control phasing plan, can you jump back to phase one real quick?
Absolutely.
At the last meeting, I think we were talking about the limits of disturbance being marked out for each phase. It looks like it's still marked out for phase two on the phase one plan. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. With the fact that Branford requires part of their standard notes, and we've bumped this a couple times, Jamie, that all of the perimeter silt fencing, that silt fences for phases be staked out by a surveyor. There will be little question once there's silt fence put up that you do not go beyond the silt fence for that phase. With that requirement of having that staked out multiple times throughout the project for the phasing, there's no question. I'm fine with it establishing, and from an engineering standpoint, best management practice, putting in the markers along the wetlands, more permanent markers to make sure that that's the hardcore don't go any further. I don't see, and if you are adamant, we can add them. I don't see the benefit, so to speak, of staking out a silt fence and then a foot behind it going, here's your phasing limit.
I guess my concern is if there's limited disturbance markers out there, a tree company is going to think that's their limit of clearing. So is the plan to have those limits of disturbance markers out at the same time as the silt fence marks?
So, and again, I'm not the surveyor in this, but how our office would typically do this, and how most surveying companies would do. So I assume that they're going to. When you send a crew out, they're going to mark as much as they possibly can when they're out there. The crew that comes out here to mark the edge of these silt fences, if you're set up, knowing setup wise, you're going to be set up down here in this valley. You're going to be marking this silt fence, and from the same setup, having a guy stake to these couple of points and put these marker notes in. That's how this is most likely going to be done by any survey company. So I expect that all of these marks will most likely be put in within days of each other. Most companies would allocate, you're going out here and doing construction stakeout for these 2-3 days if need be, so that it's addressed and done. So that's what I would expect to have happen, what standard practice would dictate. So there would be markers on all of these. The markers would be out there and the silt fence would be out there. And essentially, from the contractor standpoint, that the clearing grub, your limited disturbance is the silt fence. Don't go beyond that. Jamie, if you really are adamant you want additional markers put out there, we can add them to the plans. That's fine. I don't see a tangible benefit to it.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I'll leave it up to the commission.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Boda. I understand where Jamie is coming from, and that we often have these plans that look lovely and they're presented in best intentions and whatnot, and then things get cleared that shouldn't get cleared because we're not abundantly overt with limits of disturbance and limits of disturbance based on phase. We have very recent history of that. And so I think, again, documented clarity is critical for not just the success of any project, but for property owners and their teams to not be in front of the commission doing mea culpas and needing to fix some pretty egregious damage. So I would tend to agree with Jamie.
Understood.
This is Commissioner Bergman. Now that I'm just looking at this plan in front of me, some of the elevations, if you start at the top center, goes 94, the topography, the very top, goes 94.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay. 94. Then start going down. 92, 90, 88. Then there's a 98.
Thank you.
Upside
I'll be
down?
honest. Yeah, when we do this with the computer, sometimes I drew a line to draw the contour lines, and that should be
Okay.
an 86. It's just
Okay.
upside down. I apologize.
Thank you.
Looks like you have another one in the center. Yeah,
Oops,
you
sorry,
just
I didn't mean to
cruised right
swoop by
past
it. I just want to go sheet
No,
8.
that's okay. But it seems like there was another.
Yeah, I mean,
one
if you
upside
look
down.
at it, the contour on either side reflects that it's 86. I got caught up on that too, and I realized I figured it wasn't worth commenting on because it is upside down.
They're fixing stuff. You may as well fix all the
Yep.
things.
That one's easy. Any other questions in terms of the phasing or soil and erosion plan while we're here? Also, any other commissioners want to weigh in about additional markers on site for the limited disturbance?
This is Commissioner Bassman. I think you have some direction on additional identification. Why don't we move on?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Tim, if you want to take it away. Again, engineering wise, we had only a couple of things that were outstanding. They've all been addressed through CLA and Mr. Hofferly's office for the town engineer. So, Tim, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, I think that's right, Zach. So the last item on the CLA list in the letter that we got yesterday was the discussion of the feasible and prudent alternatives. In particular, they referenced in points number 31, 32, and 33, they wanted us to go into further detail regarding the prudent and feasible alternatives. I did submit a written submission to the commission late this afternoon outlining what our feasible and prudent alternatives were in response to the CLA letter, but I'm happy to summarize that right now. So in bullet point number 31, CLA had asked whether the elimination of building number 4 renders the project financially not feasible. The answer to that question is yes. The elimination of building number 4 does render the project not financially feasible. As we discussed last month, one of the benefits of this project is that it's going to allow the town to extend the sewer system to this particular neighborhood, not only to our property, but to the neighborhood so that other homeowners can tie into that project. The cost to extend the sewers is approximately $1 million, and I'm going to have Doug Anderson, the developer, testify shortly as to the costs of installing the sewer system at the property. Because we are expending large sums to install the sewer system, we need to get a minimum number of units in order to defray the costs of the installation of the sewer system. We initially started with a number of units. It got reduced to 30 units, and now we're down to a bare minimum of 22 units. And based on the cost of the project and the cost of the sewer system, that is the minimum number of units necessary in order to make the project economically feasible. We did consider, or the developer did consider, relocating building number 2. However, we are not able to building number 4. We were not able to locate building number 4 elsewhere in the property for a number of reasons. One was the topography of the property. 2 was additional impacts to the wetlands, even if we relocated the property. 3 was restrictions due to the bulk standards in the zoning regulations. And 4 was the fact that in the prior application for this property, the developer transferred out several acres of property, and therefore the property we're dealing with right now is a little bit smaller than the property they were dealing with 10 years ago when they dedicated that property as open space. As George Logan testified to, we're asking the commission to consider the value and the quality of the particular wetlands that's going to be impacted by building number 4. And I think it's fair to say, based on George's testimony, that the wetlands impacted by building number 4 is not a high quality wetland. And I do think that the commission can take into consideration the quality of the wetland in determining whether there is whether to approve the application or not approve the application. As a matter of fact, in the document that Jamie shared, an Inland Wetlands Commissioner's Guide to Site Plan Review, one of the statements in that manual is that the commission is to value the wetlands. So I do think that that is something you can take into consideration. When evaluating this particular wetlands, take into consideration the fact that, or the wetlands impacted by building number 4, take into consideration it's a low-grade wetland. It was previously developed, and there's actually a cement foundation within that area. Finally, when considering building number 4, we'd ask the commission to take into consideration the wetlands mitigation and creation that we're proposing as part of the application. As Zach and George went through, we've redesigned the wetlands mitigation and creation, and now we have met the commission's regulations of 2 to 1. So we would hope the commission would take that all into consideration. Next,
Commissioner Basserman,
yeah.
regarding item 31, can you explain to me why building 4 couldn't be moved to where the cul-de-sac is and a redesign regarding access with the building in that position?
Yep, if we're kind enough to have Zach pull up the plan again.
On it, give me 1 second. Screen 2, share. There you are, Tim. Would you like me to address it?
Sure. I mean, if you're, Mr. Chair, you're talking about where the cul-de-sac is at the end of the driveway?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, certainly we do run into building setback issues. Basically, the property is in the R3 zoning district. Our intention is to submit an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission to change the zoning designation to an adult housing district under the regulations. That regulation has 50-foot setbacks from the side yard and the rear yards. We're basically not able to locate a building there due to the restrictions under the zoning regulations.
And no opportunity, this is Commissioner Basserman, no opportunity for a variance regarding that setback?
I mean, there always is, but here's the issue. Right now, the property's in R3 zone. Our intention, if we get wetlands approval, is to submit an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission to change the zoning designation to the active adult community 55 and over zoning designation. That has the 50-foot setbacks that we talked about. As part of that application to Planning and Zoning, we need to submit a conceptual site plan, and that site plan has to comply with the zoning regulations. So there's really nothing we can submit to ZBA at that point in time anyway, because we're not even in the zone yet. So the short answer is I think it's going to be difficult to get a variance of a zone which doesn't exist at the current moment.
If I may also add to that, there's a human health and safety element to this as well. With the cul-de-sac design, we are able to get a fire rescue up around this curve up here and out to make this turn and exit. The other side, justifiably, it's essentially a straight shot with being able to back down with the large intersection provided between the two sections of Beacon Hill and essentially back down and out. Without that, we'd be asking a fire truck to go hundreds of feet in reverse, backing down this until it was able to then make a turn and then exit. So just in best practice, we need some sort of fire turnaround at the end of this. So eliminating that does create a health and safety concern.
This is Commissioner Begman along the lines of dividing up buildings. To get rid of building 4, couldn't you split those two? It's only 2 units. Can't you? Have you considered putting like 5, 6, and 7 together and adding one more unit to the end? Or with building 3, move it, put the pickleball court where building 4 is, and add a unit there. So you end up with the same number of units, just a different configuration.
So simply the notion of flipping the pickleball court there is still going to have a impact on that wetland.
Well, it's smaller.
A smaller impact, but still a notable impact. There still will be elements of that. Even bringing this over here, having the pickleball court here, you're still going to be having the same impacts to the wetland and the greater area as well in terms of hydraulic function. That's unavoidable, no matter what we end up doing in terms of relocating building 4.
So this is clear. Maybe Commissioner Begum, I should restate my question is, how can you divide building 4 to get rid of it and add a unit to one of these other, each add, 2 units somewhere?
I'm going to offer this back to Tim and Doug.
Yeah.
I can jump in here if you'd like. This is Doug Anderson, represent the developer Beacon Hill Property LLC. So when we start, I'll just step back a little bit and tell you how we got to this point, because this has been a multi-year endeavor, if you will, to land where we've landed today. So, Jamie, if you wouldn't mind, Exhibit 49 I sent you today. Would you pop that up real quick?
1 minute. Everyone's seeing it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So basically, this is the existing conditions site, when we started the project. And we looked at the project in a myriad of different development scenarios. As we know, there's an approved 10-lot single-family residential project approved on the site. So in looking at that project, in discussing with various town officials, trying to take into consideration the neighborhood, the sewer infrastructure costs, things that you would typically look at as a developer to make a project, financially feasible and prudent, but also as compatible as possible to the neighborhood, the environment, the surrounding, community, and so forth. So when we started the project, this is the original parcel configuration prior to approximately 2.05 acres being deeded out to the town as part of the original subdivision approval, open space subdivision approval. So what you'll see there is, we've zeroed in a development scheme here of 27 units to build the project out with until, we determined that because this subdivision was filed on the land records, they're deeded building lots. The open space has been deeded to the town of Branford already, and obviously incorporates into the Beacon Hill parcel. We decided that if this subdivision was going to be retracted, there's probably some legality issues with that parcel of land already being deeded out for open space, despite the fact that the subdivision wouldn't have been built. So we felt it was just cleaner, simpler, better for the town to discount that parcel from the development, and reconfigure the development to the point of where we have it today. So we've started out with 27 units. We're down to 22 units, and that was a function of, financial function of saying, okay, is this project still viable in its current configuration to be able to build and absorb not only the approval costs, the road costs, the offsite sewer costs. That there was some dialogue with the town departments where there was some debate whether they wanted to invest in sewer up in that neighborhood. And in this case, because Paul, as the current landowner, owns the adjacent property, we had a way to go and bring sewer up through his property, which never existed from the prior developers' situation. So there was a way to build this project for 10 units and bring sewers up through Paul's property and connect to the sewer line that exists already at the top of Rose Hill Road. So again, this has been a 4-year process. We went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, felt them out on what would be a good development for the project. We came up with an apartment version where we had 50 plus units that they felt was not a viable option for this site, given its its single family residential makeup, it's off the main bus line, things of that nature. So we've kind of zeroed in on this project as a project, an active adult community project that's got compatibility with the neighborhood. It's got enough density at the 22 units to financially be viable and buildable, unlike the project that's sat, the approved project that sat in front of us for 15 years unbuilt. So in looking at, as this process has evolved with your commission and trying to relocate, if you go back to, going back to where, if you wouldn't mind, Jamie, the main approved or proposed plan, we've utilized pretty much every area within the remaining 5 acres of land, respecting the required 50-foot setbacks within the current configuration of the lot line. And from these meetings have looked at like alternatives to say, can we combine buildings 6, 7, and 5 into 4-unit buildings? But because of the length of those 4-unit buildings and the radius of the curve, right now between building 4, 5, 6, and 7, we have 11 units, right, to make up, because we're at our limit for density at the 22 units. So because the 4-unit buildings are obviously longer by a unit, we can't get the 4-unit building to make the radius. And in fact, it would require technically a 3rd building. So 2 buildings of 4 is 8 units, but then we're more or less out of real estate to put any other building to get around that radius. We can't obviously go to the south because the cul-de-sac is there and kind of impedes in that area where a building could move south to add more footage to take, building 4 away. So, building where buildings 1 and 2 are, really to put another building on the other side of that, we have the wetlands to the north, down gradient, that obviously there's minimal and probably not enough room to accommodate the footprint of the building. Looked at possibly putting buildings up in the front section and eliminating the pickleball court. However, given the 50-foot required setback from adjacent property areas, you can see that area just gets boxed out for building any kind of structure. So we've really tried to work within the confines of the existing wetlands, and also keeping in mind that, when we initially conceived this project, this expansion of this northern wetland was not on the table. It didn't exist for us at the time. And we've kind of run into this now, in halfway through the project, when we determined that area where, and if Jamie, if you wouldn't mind putting up exhibit exhibit 48. So basically what we had created here is we had basically taken the existing conditions plan, outlined where the new wetlands have expanded upon that, and shown where, building 4 exists in that. And if you zoom in on that, you can see that there was an original building, actually even more to the north of where our building 4 is, that I believe is the sole reason this wetland has been expanded to the south, in that from the time between the original developer getting this approval, they obviously had gone in there, they removed that foundation that existed there. And if you look, the asphalt, continues up to that building, and obviously was the clear definition or, impeding force, if you will, that maintained that northern wetland boundary at that point. So when they removed that foundation, they obviously created depression or lower area. And in fact, in the field now, when you're out there, remnants of the foundation exist in that little crotch of wetland that defined that kind of southwestern area there where the back corner of building 4 exists. So that, that area, and I think George can attest to it, that soil there has obviously taken on wetland characteristics through just natural progression and time. However, this, the subsoil below that area, I believe is contains asphalt, concrete, things of that nature. So back to the point of, and I'm not going to attest to any, viability of the quality of that wetlands, but going back to our initial thought of the development is, okay, we have an area that's previously disturbed. We have the ability to work within it, and another, just to step back, when we designed our infrastructure, road systems and so forth, detention basins, we utilized more or less the same footprint, and in some cases less, because we have now gone to a private road with less asphalt and so forth in the current approved infrastructure plan. So, trying to work within the confines of the site, which is very, restrictive between grades, wetlands to the north and wetlands to the south. We've kind of patched this all in together to try and, find that balance between, environment, density, neighborhood, what works for the town, what works for everybody. This has been a extremely lengthy, detailed process to get to this point. And our theory and goal is to present a project that what we come in with, we go out with. We don't take the mentality of, hey, let's throw a couple extra units in where they shouldn't be and then give them back, because that's what many developers do. We don't do that. So, I think we've tried to go the extra mile, adding wetlands to this development that in the approved plan, if you look at the amount of wetland creation for the approved subdivision plan, it pales in comparison to what we are proposing here. So at the end of the day, while we understand there are impacts to the wetlands, we feel that we're going to be creating a better product, more functioning wetland. We're going to create a product that is in need for the residents of the town of Branford, or people who want to move to Branford, that want to downsize to a home. It's less impactful to the neighborhood, and we really vet this out as prudently as we can to get to where we are today. So that's my spiel, and I'll pass it off to everybody else, and you can ask me questions or move on.
Thanks, Doug. The only thing I want you to comment on is, can you just give the commission an overview of the cost estimates you received for the installation of the sewer system to this property?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just step back a little bit. So when we started this process, when this project was approved as the 10-lot subdivision, the developer at the time made an agreement with the town to cover the cost to install the sewer. The town was going to provide the materials. However, between the time of that agreement and fast forward years later, the town embarked on a sewer improvement project for this neighborhood of Rose Hill Road, Pinsky Drive, and Pent Road. So they designed a sewer system that serviced not only the 22 units along Rose Hill Road, but a dozen or so houses on Pinsky, as well as another 20 plus houses on Pent Road. So that created a project that a multi-million dollar sewer project, pump stations, things of that nature, to kind of fix a problem that existed in this neighborhood with failing septic systems, high groundwater level, and I can attest to that because there's a lot to the east of this project that a owner came to me to develop, and we had to install. We installed curtain drains to do test pits for the soil, and the lot it wouldn't perk out. It was not suitable for a septic system. So, not possible to do that. And of course, we know the history of the failing septic systems and systems being replaced and failing again. And it's a function of high groundwater. It's a pretty simple fact that water doesn't want to go into water, and I think that's probably why the town went through the process of designing a sewer district for this area to eventually someday deal with those issues when they either become irreparable or regulations cause people not to be able to repair systems. So backing up to that point, we went through the whole thing. We took the town plan, we sent it out to a pretty renowned sewer contractor in East Haven, Quality Associates, and they gave an estimate to do the sewer for phase one, which included tying in up at Rose Hill, stubbing a sewer line just to this property. So this does not include the sewer cost or the infrastructure costs required for our project. Putting a pump station in with backup generators, and putting manholes in deep enough to be able to accommodate the Pent Road phase of the development. And at the time, that was 2020, that we had gotten an estimate of about $900 and I think it was $12,000 or something. So that kind of began the dialogue with the town, the sewers, things of that nature. Should we do it? And back and forth, as I explained to you, where we kind of landed with a meeting with the sewer commission that said, you know what, our duty is to provide sewers to the residents of the town of Branford. We have a project that is designed. There's federal funding that was put aside for it to deal with the environmental issues that have been happening with this, or the failing septic system issues that are happening up there. But there's really just never been the catalyst to do it. So through multiple iterations, we've gotten to the point we said, well, for phase one, we can literally cut the cost of that sewer project in half by literally bringing 22 units of homes to the site, which we started out at 27, obviously, but landed at 22 when we ran into the land issue, plus the 22 units along Rose Hill. It made it a more palatable number for residents of them as well as us to be able to afford the cost of this million, which is now after COVID and costs and things of nature is probably closer to $1.2 million to $1.5 million. I know John town engineer has been working on updating that estimate because we have started that process with them where we've gotten a consensus that they would be willing to create a sewer district up here and entertain this project, if approved, to be the catalyst to start the phase one of the sewer for Rose Hill Road. So that number probably lands around $25,000 to $30,000 per unit whenever those final costs come in, divided out over 22 units on Rose Hill Road, 22 units within this project, 44 units. So number was a bit lower when we started out with 27 in there. So really that's a cost that now becomes manageable for not only us as a developer, but also the residents of the neighborhood. So with that said, road infrastructure costs to build this project, approval costs, all these kind of things, those are all functions of density. And when you start taking units away, initially we went from 27 now down to 22, close to a 30%, 25% drop in unit count, that you have to allocate those costs over that same $1.5 million to $2 million road costs over 22 units versus 27 units. Now, so do you take 22 units, take 2 units away, reduce that density by another 10%. You're adding that much, another 10 to 15% in cost per unit to be able to allocate. So you start to push up against the point where it just doesn't become financially feasible. And you can see that with the original plan, the approved plan at 10 units, it's not financially feasible to go and spend, $500,000 or 600,000 over 10 lots. The economics just don't work. So
This is Commissioner Basserman. I think we got
you
it.
get it. Okay.
We got it.
Because you were going in all different directions, but I wanted to get it on the table because that's the reality of development. So whatever it means, good, bad, or indifferent. That's the point.
This is Commissioner Basserman. I have a concern. We have the peer review folk that have been patient, and I'm wondering whether it's prudent now to hear from them regarding mitigation, the erosion controls, and the feasible and prudent comments that might need some embellishment, given the fact that I think we have them till 9.
I think that makes sense from the applicant's perspective, Mr. Chair. I would just point out in the letter, I did respond to comments 32 and 33 regarding feasible and prudent alternatives. So that is before the commission. I don't want to spend time going through it right now because, as you mentioned, CLA's time is limited tonight. So we're happy to go to them right now.
This is Bob Russo from CLA Engineers. And Kyle Halbert is with me, and we have been listening into this public hearing. First, I'd just like to talk in terms of the mitigation. I believe that all the questions that I had about Reman's mitigations plans have been answered, and that with a few other notes on the plan, it can satisfactorily be dealt with. So I don't think I have any further real concerns in that area. In terms of the alternatives analysis, given that I think came through this afternoon at about 5 o'clock, those additional comments, I've just not had time to look at them to see if I think that those are in fact addressed. One of the comments dealt with their alternatives analysis exhibit 2, which appeared to provide a comparable number of units, but without necessarily the wetland impact. Again, I haven't had a chance to review that material as it just came in this afternoon. Those are really the only things I have left to say, and I'll just ask Kyle Hubbard if he has anything additional.
Sure. Yeah, Kyle Hubbard from CLA. I had reviewed the latest revisions. I didn't review what came in this afternoon, but the applicant and their engineers have addressed all of my engineering comments for the project.
Okay. Which then, as Commissioner Basserman leads us to, if we need that time, and I assume that the town staff hasn't had a chance to review the material that came in late today, is that something that we're going to need to review at a subsequent meeting, or is that something that is of a minor nature?
Jamie, Frederick, and the wetland agent, who are you asking?
I guess either the peer review folk or staff, who I assume have the same issue. They haven't had a chance to review the material that came in late today.
Jamie, Frederick, and the wetland agent. I have not had a chance to review it yet. I do think that there's been some comments about some minor modifications that could be made that might help make things clearer. And I think it also would be ideal to be able to review those materials to see if there's any additional comments. So to that end, I do think it would be beneficial for the commission to request a continuance from the applicant. I think that another consideration the commission has is whether a response letter from CLA would be adequate to address the outstanding points, or if you would be looking for a response letter and attendance at the next meeting, assuming that a continuance is granted.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think as far as the peer reviewer, it seems like unless there's anything very significant from the material that came in today, that we wouldn't necessarily need the peer reviewer back at the next meeting, and that a letter would really be sufficient. I would agree that we should look for an extension so that we could keep the public hearing open and have the opportunity to review all of the material that's just come in, and that the applicant can take some time to make some of the adjustments that we've discussed tonight in detail and to document those so that we have everything we need.
Jamie Frederick and the Wilton agent. So I think it might be appropriate at this time to ask the applicant if they're willing to grant an extension. And if they are, then I think it would be appropriate for the commission to consider whether there's anything else that the commission wants to ask of the peer review while they are in attendance at the meeting in regards to anything that was discussed this evening or that's on the record that you had a question about that hasn't been fully addressed yet. So unless
Jamie,
Peter...
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. This is Doug. I just wanted to comment on that, if I could. You okay?
Go ahead.
Yep, okay. So I think there's the couple issues in the peer review letter I think would be worthy of going over what Tim had mentioned prior to us turning them over. If we could go through, we have no problem, by the way, extending the hearing, but if we could go through those comments, because I think they do fall within the parameters of the prudent and feasible alternatives. If we could go through those aspects or responses to that letter, and then obviously field any new questions that might arise from that, so we at least have vetted that out completely. I think that would be a prudent thing to do at this point.
I would agree.
All right, so
Tim, you want to finish that?
Sure. So in the letter that we sent today, we responded in particular to comments 32 and 33 from CLA engineers. And in short,
Attorney Lee, this is Commissioner Boda. If I can ask you to pause, and Jamie, if you could pull up that letter so that we can be looking at what Attorney Lee is referring to, that would be very helpful.
Sure. Thank you. So once again, this is my response letter to the CLA letter dated December 11th. And in particular, they asked they had bullet points 32 and 33. And the question raised in those bullet points was, why is the 54 unit proposal not a feasible and prudent alternative? And I said, as I said in the letter, the developer would like nothing more than to develop this property with 54 units. It would be to their betterment in order to do that. However, as Doug had mentioned, this project has been in the works for 4 years. In anticipation of being here tonight, they had met with the Planning and Zoning Commission. They had met with the First Selectman. They had met with the Sewer Commission. And they had tried to develop a plan that would be viewed favorably from the town. The town, coming from the First Selectman's office to Harry Smith at the Town Planner's office, and ultimately the Planning and Zoning Commission, all came to the conclusion that this property would be a great location for the age-restricted development. In order to develop this property as an age-restricted housing development, we need to submit an application pursuant to section 5.6 of the Branford zoning regulations to zone change this property from the R3 zone to the restricted housing, age-restricted housing development zone. That is a legislative function of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They have full discretion to approve that zone change or to deny that zone change. When Doug and Paul first approached the Planning and Zoning Commission and Harry, they had discussed the possibility of 54 units at that site in 2 kind of tower apartment style developments. And both Harry Smith and the Planning and Zoning Commission said, no, we are not going to approve a development that is that dense or is not consistent with the neighborhood. Why don't you guys go back to the drawing board, scale down the number of units, make them ranch style units, because that's what's consistent with the neighborhood, and make the density consistent with what's in the surrounding neighborhood. Based on those discussions, ultimately, we designed the plan that's in front of you that has the 22 units because, one, we think that that's something that's consistent with the neighborhood, and I know that's not necessarily wetlands consideration, but it's also something that can be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And without the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission to adopt this property for the age-restricted housing development, we cannot proceed with the development. So it's our position that the 54 units is not a feasible and prudent alternative because it's not an application that would receive approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission, because the Planning and Zoning Commission would find that 54 units in 2 apartment-style towers is not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And that is why we do not consider the 54-unit plan in Exhibit B to be an alternative number 2 to be a feasible and prudent alternative.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Just a question. This is a 55 and over community?
Correct. There's a provision in the zoning regulations, section 5.6, entitled Age Restricted Housing Development, that allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to change the underlying zoning designation upon application of the property owner to the age restricted housing zone, which would ultimately allow multifamily residential development limited to 55 and over.
Hold on. So the original plan, this 54 unit development, was a multi-story application or plan?
I think there have been a number of iterations of the plan, but there was a plan that showed it 54 units in 2 buildings.
Okay. So if that was the original thought, why wouldn't we be able to put building 4 on top of one of the other buildings?
Because I can jump. This is Doug Anderson again. Yeah, maybe another point too. So given the fact that these are active adult designed units, these units are designed for 0 or very minimal step entry, 1 level living. So all the units have master bedrooms on the first floor. With some additional bedrooms up. So that
obviously wasn't a consideration when you had 54 units.
The 54 units is a multi-story stacked garden style apartment. So those are all accessed either via elevator, or if it was going to be, that would be considered a non-active adult community. It would just be a rental apartment project. So that's just a function of the design of that building and the fact that you're able to accommodate, 3 floors of 9 units each, stacked, vertically to achieve the 27 units per building, 54 units for the 2 buildings. So, completely different type of product. This unit type, and we can submit designs for the buildings, but these all have garages at the entry, 1 or 2 or 0 steps into the unit. So stacking a unit on top of another unit inherently is not going to work from a product perspective, because typically a unit buyer that's age 55 and older is looking for some accommodation of 1 level living, minimal vertical stair rises, and so forth. So it's not a conducive design product for active adult communities, which is why the footprints are bigger on these buildings. They stretch out a little bit more, and it's just a function of the product type, if you will. And these units are, if you will, I don't want to say townhouse, but they're, each unit is a segment of the building, where in the 54 unit plan, if you look at that, Jamie, if you want to bring that up, I think that's one of the early exhibits. But that's a stacked unit of units on top of units. No garages, typically a rental type product, where this is a for sale to be owned by the unit owner through a condominium association, common interest community.
And Doug, to further point, there's also, from a zoning perspective, there's a 35-foot height limitation in the in that district too, which would also impact the ability to stack unit on top of unit.
Correct. Yeah, we would push past 35 feet in height between the floor to floors and the roof lines and so forth. Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm going to take us slightly off topic a little bit, but Mr. Anderson noting that this will be like the association run. I think one of the things that we have looked for with communities that are going to be association run is some material that will go with their the homeowner documents and the bylaws having to do with just care for the property and the wetland and all of those different things that we've looked for that material to be included in the homeowner documents to ensure continuity of caretaking.
Yeah, that obviously
makes sense.
That would be the intent, and obviously we would be happy to make review and acceptance of the public offering statement, and to be able to put the appropriate documentation in there to deal with, and we have done this in the past, especially when there's detention basins and there's maintenance issues and certain types of maintenance requirements as part of that. The more information you can put in the association document, the better off it is to create less confusion and going outside of the lane, if you will, of proper care of the facility and the protection of the wetlands and so forth. So we have no problem with that, and we're planning on doing that obviously anyway. So
would you be able to put together at least what would be not boilerplate, but something akin to that could be submitted with the any other additions that you're going to, or changes that you're going to be making prior to the next meeting?
So, I mean, I think the reality is, so we would have to look and say, okay, what, from a regulatory perspective, what would we want to see in that document, right? And I would probably push that back to you guys to say, okay, typically we'd like to see, X, Y, Z, and I'm sure you must have some kind of criteria that you like to, see followed with that. So, I mean, for us to create a whole public offering statement and try and work that into that.
Yeah,
I think it's not.
I don't mean, I mean, the public offering statement it is its own document, but the portion of it that would address the stormwater management and the wetland areas and just care for those. I think that that part, even if it's not a final, at least it is. It's a starting place from which, and that might be something that, yeah.
So, I mean, we could take a look at, say, our some template document that we have, and then I could work with Jamie and Zach and George to see how, what kind of language we would want to put and where we would want to put it in what section of the public offering, whether it's a bylaw or a rules and regulations section, or whatever is the appropriate component of the document. Since it is a public offering statement, part of that document does go away at some point in time once the project is sold and turned over to the unit owners. So we would be happy to explore that as well.
I've seen other towns deal with that kind of as a condition of approval, that if the application gets approved, it would get approved subject to the condition that when the bylaws and the declaration is prepared, that language be subject to the approval of the chair and the wetlands enforcement officer. Because as Doug mentioned, it's hard to prepare those documents, and those documents take a significant amount of time to prepare. And I understand you're not looking to have us prepare the entire document, but usually that gets taken care of somewhere down the road. So if the commission felt comfortable making that a condition of approval subject to review by the chair and the wetlands official, we'd be that's the way I've seen other towns deal with that issue.
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. There is a brief document that addresses maintenance of the stormwater system components it doesn't span into any, the wetland areas or anything of that, but there are some brief, guidelines for maintaining the stormwater system. I don't remember what exhibit off the top of my head, but there is something in there.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I think you mentioned that this is now, given the driveway size, a private road.
That's correct. So everything
So
everything will be association maintained.
Okay.
No public, no public private trash pickup, snow removal, landscaping, things of that nature. Typically,
Yeah.
one company does that all.
Yeah, regarding snow removal, you mentioned, the density on the site. Where, if we have a large storm, where do we deposit the snow?
I mean, typically, we've seen in the past when, there's areas at the end of drives or in the cul-de-sac where there may be space to stockpile, but we have on occasions in other projects where, the density is more intense like it is. We do have to haul off that site. There is area at the front of the project. If you noticed where the pickleball court and parking is there, that would accommodate some, snow storage. But have on occasion had to haul snow away. So we can take a look and try and find some designated snow stockpile areas on there as well, if that would, make everybody feel comfortable.
Doug, if I may, Jamie was actually trying to highlight it. We did address just typical snowstorm you'd see from Connecticut, where we would do that. Doug is right. Larger storms would probably result in the need to haul off site. But that teal color that Jamie was highlighting before running her cursor over, that is where we would be looking, that you would have snow on top of the grassy areas along the entrance, on the grassed island in the center cul-de-sac, as well as along the exterior cul-de-sac between locations. Typical snow removal that you would see a plow truck putting it in the open spaces that aren't being utilized for sidewalks and what have you.
And that's designated on the plan?
Yeah. Jamie's on the page right now. You'll see the teal areas that are not wetlands. Those have all. That's where we would be. That's where snow removal would be arriving.
And where does it say on the plan that the teal area is where the snow would arrive?
I believe it is called out. There's a call out somewhere on here. There should be at the very, very least. Call out. Snow storage typical right at the entrance underneath Rose Hill Road, pointing into the hatched area.
Thank you.
Amy Frederick, in the wetland agent. It is 9 o'clock, so I don't know. Do we want to wrap things up with the peer review so that they can sign off? If anything else comes up, I can always follow up with them to let them know.
Yes.
If there's something else the commission wants them to address. Sounds like the applicant's willing to consent to an extension, so I think it might be appropriate to wrap things up with the peer review, see if there's any public comment, and then go back to the applicant and continue it to the next meeting. Just for clarification, our next meeting is January 9th. Is there consent to continue the public hearing to that date?
Yeah, we agree to that. That's Doug Anderson.
This is Commissioner Begeman. I have a question, and it maybe can wait till next month, but I thought I'd put it out there. It's a design question. I'll just put it out there. Why, for the northeast unit, why is the road closer to the wetlands and not further east and in front of that building unit? The right leg of Beacon Hill Road.
So that are you talking about the road that goes up to buildings 1 and 2, or?
Yes.
Yeah. We actually did look at that from a design perspective. We did have a version where the driveway was on the other side. However, we felt that given that those are single family homes and those are people's backyards, that that vehicular traffic would be closer to those units, and obviously headlights, things of that nature that would potentially migrate through. But we felt that this would be a more applicable layout, given that it's sort of backyard to backyard, less impact, less intrusive to the neighbors. So that's the final the theory of why we have placed these buildings this way.
Thank you.
This Commissioner Bassman, so I understand that CLA will take this latest information received today, review it, and then report via correspondence with any comments, concerns, and that they need not attend the next meeting on January 9th. Is that my understanding?
Kyle Habert from CLA. That was our understanding as well. Yes, we can review the latest information and provide a letter report back to the commission.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I think I might have to follow up with the applicant and the peer review team about an estimate for that additional review if needed, but I'll make sure that that's done. And if the applicant can just shoot me an email confirming the extension to continue the public hearing to January 9th, that would be great. I'm not saying we should close the public hearing right now. I'm just on the topic. So I think that
I'll send that right now, Jamie.
concludes the peer review portion. Do you
We
want to
have a
open
hand
public
raised.
comment?
Yes. Public is invited to make comment now on this public hearing, and I see we have a hand raised with somebody identified as Bruno. You wish to speak?
Hi, this is Bruno Chacon. I'm not sure what happened there, but I didn't raise my hand. Maybe I must have hit the button by accident.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there any member of the public that does wish to speak?
Jamie, you're muted, I think. I don't hear you.
Sorry, my space bar stopped working. I was just commenting that the instructions for raising your hand are on the agenda. If you're having a hard time raising your hand, you can unmute, but
Going once, going twice. Hearing nothing at this point, Commissioner Basserman, is there any reason why we wouldn't close the public hearing?
It would be
or probably
continued.
continue the public hearing until January 9th?
I guess I would ask the commission to express if they have any other questions or concerns they're looking for the applicant to address for the next meeting. And then also offer the applicant a chance to see if there's any, I mean, there's no public comment to address, but.
Commissioner Papantonis, there were some letters in the with public comment, I believe.
This is true. Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, we did receive 3 emails which have been added to the record. So when the applicant's responding to the other items that have been brought up, address any comments in there that were raised. One thought I've had is in regards to the sewer versus septic concerns and whether sewer would be an improvement. I don't know that East Shore District Health Department would speak to anything. The only time we've reached out to them is when there's septic systems involved directly in a project. But if the commission's interested, I could reach out to them to see if they're willing to provide any comment for consideration.
Sure. There's no harm for that, I think. Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? Okay. Public hearing on 240902 is continued until January 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And now we move to enforcement. Cease and correct 240701, 15 and 7 Beacon Hill, the removal of vegetation and disturbance within the wetland and adjacent upland. This is a continuation of a hearing that we had previously. Jamie, any additional information that we've received since the last time we discussed this item?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'm not aware of any change in circumstances. So my recommendation would be to continue this as well to the January 9th meeting.
Any commissioner object to the continuation of 240701 until January 9th? So be it. Cease and correct 240901 and the notice of violation 9 High Plains Road, 40 Hickory Hill, regarding resulting sedimentation of the pond located on 40 Hickory Hill Lane. Again, a continuation of the show cause hearing. We had some rain. Jamie, were you able to get out there and take a look?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I was able to swing by in the morning and Katie swung by in the afternoon. The ponds appeared to remain clear. We just made inspections from the roadway. We didn't, go down and do any samples or anything like that. So I've corresponded with the soil scientists and the parties involved, and I suggested that this item be tabled / continued to the January 9th meeting so that the soil scientist can investigate and address whether his recommendations remain the same or if there's perhaps a change in that recommendation based on more current site conditions.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. Are we getting, after that rain, are they taking turbidity data?
I have not received any data, no. So I don't want to discuss this too much because I did tell the parties they didn't need to be here, but I can certainly follow up and say that that's been asked. And I know that they were looking for another rain event before the next update. So I can request that when they do that rain, when they have that rain event observation, which is probably already part of what they're looking to do, but I will confirm.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Cease and correct 240902 continued as well to January 9th. Just get your sleep on January 8th. Cease and correct 241201, 175 Cherry Hill Road, 167 Cherry Hill in Hosley. Non-compliance with sedimentation erosion control.
Wait a minute.
Wetland 220705, show cause hearing. Do we have
Peter, you
any...
skipped one.
Did we do Leeds Island Road?
Oh, Leeds Island Road. 240902, 170, 182 Leeds Island Road. Clearing and earth disturbance without a permit. Continuation. Show cause hearing previously.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I emailed requesting an update on December 6th, and I received a call from attorney Janet Brooks saying that they're working on it. She wasn't sure if they would have something ready for today. And I discussed that if not, please provide a written update. And that something should certainly be ready for the next meeting. So I did get an update this evening from the property owner stating that he has efforts are in progress. He's retained attorney Janet Brooks, soil scientist George Logan, and is in the process of coordinating with a CAD drafting technician to assist with the requested layout of the property. So I think it would be appropriate to continue this to the January 9th meeting, and I will follow up with parties representing that.
Any objection to continuing this cease and correct order? Okay. Now 241201, 175 Cherry Hill Road, 167 non-compliance erosion control plan from inland wetland 220705.
Jamie
You got
Frederick
some new material here, Jamie?
Lynn Agent. So this is a new cease and correct order. I just issued it yesterday. So we obviously got some rain yesterday. There was a case where situation where stormwater was running down Cherry Hill Road and getting down to the water course that crosses under Cherry Hill Road. So let me just pull up the cease and correct order with some pictures, and then I also went back out today and took some more pictures, and we'll update you with that information. And then we do have the property owner present as well. So give me 1 minute. Just pulling everything up so I don't have to go back and forth. Okay. All right, is everyone seeing a letter?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to jump down to the pictures. So as you can see, this is the water was following the shoulder and kind of dipping down, cutting down in this area here, and going down into the area adjacent to the water course. And this is the water course on the west side of Cherry Hill Road, and the water course on the east side of Cherry Hill Road. You can kind of tell based on the differences that the water flows kind of from the top of the picture down on this side, and then from the right of the picture left, and then they converge and go through the culvert over to here. So I'm gonna jump real quick to the photos I took today. This is that same curb line. This is where the water was cutting down. This is kind of the area, again, where it was cutting down. You can see some of the sediment settled out. And then the water course is appearing to be running clear at this point. I didn't observe significant amount of sediment deposited. And then this is on the east side. You can see there's a little bit of sediment deposited, but it didn't appear to be significant, and the water flowing is running clear. Again, this is that same area. So essentially, I'm gonna jump back to, so this is from yesterday. These are some photos going through the site. Again, this is where it's going down to the wetland area. Let me just scroll real fast so I can get to the, here we go. So you can see that the erosion controls along the edge of the roadway were kind of lacking. This was taken approximately mid-morning. I contacted the property owner. He'd already heard from other town staff and was arranging to have hay bales delivered and installed. And I couldn't walk over to the silt fence because this was soup. But you can kind of get a feel for what the site was looking like at the beginning of the day. I went back out to the site today, and yesterday afternoon a lot of improvements were made, and they were making further improvements today. So you can see they put a lot of stake hay bales along the backside of the curb, and then also kind of as check dams. You can see that it did serve a function of keeping sediment from or at least the full extent of sediment from migrating down along the roadway. So there were certainly some improvements made, and they were still working on making additional improvements.
Can you scroll back up? It seems like the hay bales end, but you continue to go, it continues to slope downhill.
Yeah, so you can't really see it. There is a silt fence down here. It did need some repairs as well. They were in the process of doing that. I don't know where it currently stands. So essentially, here, let me jump to the GIS maps. So I'm going to jump down here because you can see everything. So this is the new roadway. And what you're looking at is, oh gosh, that's horrible. This area right here. And you can kind of see the silt fence. There's actually a couple rows because it has failed historically and needed repairs because there's a lot of water that flows that way. So they needed to fix the erosion controls here. There's another spot over here. And then they had a lot of water flowing down with sediment running off from the site down along this shoulder to approximately here, which is where that culvert crossing is.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, can you go back to that point right there? That water coming down that road, especially with the curve, et cetera, that's going to probably come down at a pretty good clip, right? Why wouldn't we try to buffer it before it hits the erosion controls with hay bales on the top of the slope?
Yeah, so the erosion controls definitely needed some improvement. They're on their way there. My recommendation is that essentially the project engineer or an engineer go out to the site, investigate the erosion controls relative to where they are in the site development, and make recommendations for what additional improvements they need to make. Have an inspection once those improvements have been made, and go from there essentially.
Commissioner Bangman, Jamie, was that pile of dirt with all the water coming down, was that their stockpile?
Yeah, you can see there's a pile here,
Yeah.
here, and here.
It's really high.
Yes. And there were no erosion controls. There were erosion controls and they hydro-seeded late in the season and the erosion controls were removed and not reinstalled. And the hydro seed did not. Well, some of it took, but not sufficient amounts.
So this is a permitted activity, yes?
Yeah, so there's the subdivision approval, and then there's some of the lots require individual approvals.
Okay. And so let me ask you, what is the goal tonight is a cease and correct? Or
This is a cease and correct order, so this is the start of the show cause hearing. The commission either can make a decision regarding whether to uphold and modify or overturn, or you can request additional information.
I think that it would be very helpful to have the sediment and erosion control document, as well as any conditions for approval that we had done. And I, to put it plainly, I would like to know why this is such a mess. If this is a relatively new permitted like this kind of thing should not be happening, and don't they have to be doing reports when there's so much rainfall? And why is the stockpile not, there's just so many questions that are exploding out of my head right now, that I'm gonna stop.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So the subdivision was approved as a subdivision without regulated activity application because the activity is greater than 100 feet away from the wetland. However, it is a large project and there were concerns relative to potential impacts to wetlands and watercourses as we can see. So the commission did review it and did take a permit. However, there were no permit requirements for weekly erosion control reporting. There were no bond requirements for erosion controls from the Inland Wetland Commission. I did go out to the site and address the fact that erosion controls needed to be reinstalled. I did not follow up since that inspection until this current inspection where I noticed that there was the issue with sediment getting all the way down the shoulder of the road and down to the water course. At which point I felt that the cease and correct order was warranted to ensure that there was a timely response to the matter and that this was considered moving forward to make sure that it wasn't waited so that to ensure that the those working on site didn't wait to this point to correct in the future.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, didn't you say that you were looking to get an assessment from a professional outfit as to what improvements needed to be made? So if that's true, why wouldn't we just continue the cease and correct until such time as that material becomes available for review?
That's up to the commission. So long.
Can I just add to that very quickly? I agree with that, and I would also say that as part of the cease and correct, so the uphold and amend, or that there need to be reports back to the commission upon any rain event greater than 1 inch.
Okay, so the erosion control plan that was approved as part of the subdivision had it had some phasing. It had for the construction of the road, and then it had for lots on each side of the road. So, but it also had these cute, teeny, tiny little stockpiles, which, as you can tell from the aerial image, is not what is the case. And also it shows these ringed with silt fence, which again is not the case. So I think it's important to have the project engineer go out there and assess. So I think, would it be fair to say you're looking for an assessment of what needs to be installed? An erosion control plan showing what should be installed, like a sketch markup type thing.
Yeah, I guess this Commissioner Baskin, the other thing is that huge pile is just the accumulation of, these smaller quote planned piles, or is it there was more work that was done than what was alleged in the permit?
I think that stockpiles are generally underrepresented on site plans.
That's a big underrepresentation.
So I see that the property owner has his hand raised, and I will let him speak to that matter. I thought I had another thought I wanted to finish, but I don't. So unless, Chairman, do you want to hand it over?
Yeah, please do.
Commissioner, this is Bruno Chacon, the owner of the property. That stockpile there is, we estimated about 15,000 yards of fill coming off the site. Those piles are still there from the accumulation of cutting in the road. There was nothing else brought in. Currently, there's only lot 1 that's being developed, and there was not much from there. So those 2 piles that are there are currently just from the cut in the road. And only that. Now, since this rain, we have I addressed it right away first thing this morning, and yesterday we were out there bringing in hay bales. We brought in about 200 hay bales so far. I have another 75 coming tomorrow. So I'm on it as quickly as possible. We've reinstalled silt fence down where the slope is. Closer to Cherry Hill Road and the water RWA down, right there, Jamie. Right at that point. So when I left today about 2:30, they were fixing the silt fence and reinstalling new ones. So there's currently 3 rows of silt fence, not 2. And tomorrow there'll be more hay bales installed. We emptied those silt sacks today. The amount of water that's coming off of the site is really uncontrollable. We are there doing whatever we can. Look at the amount of silt fence that's there currently and hay bales. So it's working, whatever we're doing. And it's pretty much all I can do unless I speak with the engineer on record and we come up with a different plan. Jamie, I sent you earlier pictures.
Excuse me, this is Commissioner Brown. I have a little problem with in the same sentence, uncontrollable and it's working in the same
So
sentence.
the amount of water that's yesterday came down, we didn't have hay bales set up and silt fencing in the correct areas. So the water, Jamie, you had mentioned today, we have a road that is lower than grade, right? So that's causing a problem with all the silt is overtopping the catch basins. So today we installed hay bales in front of all the basins to slow that down. We have another option of installing stone in front of the hay bales, which will slow down the silt a little bit in front of all the 11 basins. So prior to installing the hay bales, it was uncontrollable. Now that we've done that, it slowed it down immediately, and it seems to be working. That's all I have for this moment.
So this is Commissioner Boda, your intention is to get in touch with the engineer to ensure, to revisit those plans and ensure that all the sediment and erosion controls will do their job and retain sediment on the property and out of water courses.
Correct. Today, Jamie, later this afternoon, I sent you the check dams that they also installed in front of lot 5 and 6. There's 2 more check dams that they put there that are going against the stockpile. I am currently working on getting that fill out of there. It's very difficult, as we know. There's not a lot of people that need it. So I am working on getting it out of there so we can eliminate this problem.
Just Commissioner Basser, one other question on the stockpiles. The plan that showed those circles, were all of those stockpiles going to be from the cut of the road as well?
Those were way too small of an area for these stockpiles to remotely handle. They were smaller areas. I don't remember the amount of cubic yards it held, but it was really, really small.
So this is Commissioner Boda. Who was the engineer that created those plans?
Giuliano Associates.
And is Giuliano and Associates going to be revisiting the plans, even though the stockpiles were, what did you say? Clearly undersized?
Clearly undersized.
Clearly undersized.
Yep.
So is the same engineering firm that made the mistake going to be reevaluating the plan?
I'm going to reach out to the owner tomorrow and come up with a plan to see what we need to do.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I see that a representative of Giuliano Associates has their hand raised.
Mr. Georgiano?
Hey guys, Zach Georgian and Giuliano Associates. I just want to add to the record. I'm not actually here for this, but as one of the engineers, the stockpiles that have created were supposed to have been removed during essentially operating as a quarrying operation when cutting the road in initially. The site contractor chose to stockpile all of that material that was supposed to be being quarried away on site. That was not a function of our engineered plans. Our phasing plans, construction, and the approval stated that that material was to be being hauled off during excavation.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. The site plans have not been fully followed through this project, and that's part of why I'm saying that the erosion control should be addressed based on current site conditions. Because if you look at the erosion control plans and you look at the site, they don't align. So that's why I think it's pertinent that the an engineer is involved in coming up with and making sure that there is a solution on site for the conditions that there are.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I think I feel like we are at a point where I don't know that we're gonna get any further tonight, other than the property owner, the developer, the engineer need to get together and get their ducks in a row, and ensure that this doesn't happen again, to bring the site back into compliance with its permit. And also that I would like to amend the cease and correct to require that there needs to be an inspection and a report to the Wetland Commission, to staff, with any rain event within 24. I don't remember our boilerplate, Jamie, if it's 24 hours and the size of the rain event.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So usually we kind of follow the state general permit, and I believe it's 24 hours and a 1/4 inch rain event. I can take a look into that.
That would be what I would like to see.
So I guess my question also would be, do you want to make a decision regarding the cease and correct order, or do you want to continue it with the direction that inspection reports shall be submitted for any rain event, we'll say greater than a 1/4 inch?
Can we uphold, amend, and then continue to amend later, or are we adding this detail and then deferring until later?
I think it might make sense. So you're looking for inspection reports, you're looking for essentially a revised erosion control plan to address current site conditions. I'll throw in there, even though I know that the property owner is looking to do it, having the roadway swept prior to next week, because we're expecting more rain. We don't want that sediment to move any further. And so I would say maybe have the report submitted for review at the January 9th meeting, at which point I think then it would be appropriate to make a decision, because at that point you'll have what the recommendation is. And I would probably say that anything that can be done in the interim should be done.
Yeah, and you said that the catch basin diapers were emptied out?
Yes. Yeah, the silt socks have been emptied. I haven't personally inspected that, but we do have pictures that indicate that. And I did see a couple. I didn't specifically check the silt sacks while I was out on site.
This is Commissioner Begemont with just general question. When something hasn't been implemented as designed and you run into a problem, like all that silt running into Regional Water Authority property, which is our drinking water, what else can we do except say, in addition to saying, okay, as you know, do some erosion and control for the site as it stands, because this is going to, all winter, this thing is going to leach out.
So this is Commissioner Boda, we have in the past stopped development until the site was put into a condition that the water resources were no longer in peril. We have done that before.
Commissioner Begemont again, I just wondering, can something be put until they can get rid of this stuff? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know whose problem that is. It probably is an economical problem, not a physical problem, of just removing this stuff. But in addition to silt stuff, can they put something on top of these piles to reduce this migration?
They should be seeded so that, I mean, that's the point, right? Is I'll let the property or the developer speak to that.
It was seeded. Unfortunately, it was seeded too late. It could be covered. It could, with erosion control blanket or
like the coconut mat or something.
Okay. Some sort of matting to help reduce the amount of transport. And these would be the kind of things that I'd be looking for the project engineer to provide. in part because none of us are professionals. So if we tell them to do something and it doesn't work, you know. I see Bruno's hands raised. I don't know if it's still raised from before or if he has it raised again.
No, it was still raised from before, but I'll speak on that last comment. I'm in contact with Fred Russo from Quality tomorrow morning, and we're going to talk about doing the mats. We already talked about it today about doing the hay mats. I will mention you said coconut mats, and we'll see if that will handle it. I will do whatever I have to do to control what's happening. I'm not avoiding it. The minute Jamie called me on it, I was on it very quickly. So I will make sure that it gets done, and I'll reach out to Chris Giuliano and Zach if I have to make sure that we come up with a plan to control this. I am working on getting that pile of dirt out there as quickly as possible. So these are all actions that I'm taking. I'm not avoiding it and ignoring the problems there. I am handling it.
This is Commissioner Basserman. So are we continuing the show cause hearing, waiting for the report on the erosion controls? Meanwhile, getting reports in a rain event more than a quarter inch? Or are we doing something other than continuing the show cause?
So Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, two things. One, before I forget, before you purchase matting, I would suggest you contact the engineer to make sure that whatever you're purchasing is appropriate for the condition. Two, in regards to the question that the chairman just asked, I would just remind the commission that if you decide to continue the show cause hearing, the cease and correct order remains in effect until the commission makes a decision. So just wanted to make sure you understood that. And I think we could work with, provide guidance. This is how we've kind of been doing things of what it is the commission's looking for to get to a resolution. Or if you want to modify and uphold, you can do that as well. But I think it's beneficial when you have an actual plan to review. To that end, though, I also think it would be beneficial to have these improvements made, maybe reviewed, by staff and made prior to your next meeting. And then if you have any outstanding concerns, those would be addressed January 9th. So
this Commissioner Basserman, don't we have to augment the original cease and correct with these latest directives?
You could uphold and modify to codify those objectives, or you could you could direct me to do an update letter. It sounds like everyone is kind of leaning towards the uphold and modify, and I think that might actually be appropriate.
Yeah.
In the sense that we want these corrections made prior to the next meeting, and then for you to have any say on any additional things you want done at that meeting.
Works for me.
Yeah,
Yep.
Jamie, one more question, just if you could get information on what is the material, what kind of soil is in that stockpile? If we can get a read on its composition, how much sand versus silt versus clay, because that's going to give us a sense of mobility.
Okay, so we've got reporting, stockpile material composition, revised
Erosion control.
revised erosion control plan, and inspection, and road to be swept prior to Monday. Does that cover everything?
Yeah,
I think so.
Are there any questions on that from the property owner or Giuliano Associates if they want to weigh in on?
Jamie, Bruno here. The soil composition, is that something that needs to be tested by a soil scientist? Is that what you're looking for?
You're looking for like what type of soil it is and its
Yes.
erodibility, is that correct, Commissioner Boda?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to be, I don't know, I'm assuming it's going to be a disturbed soil, and so the composition in terms of percentage soil, silt, sand, it doesn't look like there's any organic matter in there to speak of. So,
Okay, thank you.
All right,
All right, so a minute. Are you guys making a motion to uphold and modify based on the items that we just discussed?
Commissioner Boda, I will make a motion that we uphold and modify cease and correct 24-1201, 175 Cherry Hill, 167 Cherry Hill and Holesley Road, with the aforementioned items, including the sediment and erosion control, working with the engineering company to ensure the site has the setup that it needs based on current site conditions. The soil, the stockpile soil composition, and the reporting of any sediment and erosion controls within 24 hours following a rain event of to be confirmed a quarter of an inch based on the Connecticut state guidelines for standard practices.
is there a second on that motion?
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Any opposed to that motion? All right, we'll take a vote. Commissioner Papantonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Meinson,
Commissioner Meinson, aye.
Commissioner Armrod,
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Okay.
It's 9:43 and I did that all from memory.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That showed you can go longer.
No, I'm out.
Applications for review in the weather 24-1102, 183 Cherry Hill Road Extension, new single family residence.
This is that same development, right, Commissioner Papantonis?
Yes.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Yes, this is one of the lots from the subdivision we were just looking at. So this application was for receipt at the last meeting. It is located within the Regional Water Authority watershed. Notifications went out today. So long story short, I don't know if the commission wants to act on this tonight, given that the notices just went out and that you just upheld a cease and correct order. So my question for the commission is, would you like to continue it to the January 9th meeting, or would you like to review it and see if it's something that would potentially be actionable by the agent if the site gets brought into compliance with the recommendations? Just asking. I'm seeing heads being shaken no. However, if we can have some verbal comments on the record, it would be appreciated.
This is Commissioner Begeman. Is this lot? It looked like from the drawings, it's not even in the 100 feet of upland review.
Yes,
so the reason we need
to the reason why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
Pull up the site plan so you guys can at least look at it, and
Yeah.
then you can say what you want to say.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm gonna make sure I'm pulling up the latest and greatest. And we do, I believe, have somebody present to overview these site plans as well. So I'll screen share, and I don't know, is there somebody present to give a brief overview of what the proposal is so that the commission can then make a decision on how to proceed?
Hi, Zach Georgian and Giuliano Associates. I'll be completely upfront. I did not design this. Unfortunately, Romeo of our office was occupied, and knowing that I was going to be here for Beacon Hill, he asked me to sort of pinch hit for this. I wasn't exactly aware that there had been the previous situation I had not been roped in on. Real quick, what we have here is Lot 8 of the Cherry Hill Road Extension subdivision. It is approximately 32,000 square foot lot. We are looking to build the one residence on here. Similar to what we saw in Lot 11, this house does have a slightly larger footprint, so we are again seeing the inclusion of some Coltech units. Using 4 units to mitigate the peak flow to match the assumptions made for the site and the detention basin further down, we were able to mitigate the increase due to the larger footprint of the building. We are in this particular site plan maintaining the limits of grading that was approved by the Wetlands Commission as well as the subdivision approval, and we are maintaining the perimeter controls as approved in that subdivision approval along the wetlands. As such, we are keeping all grading activities outside of that 100-foot upland review area, and we're trying to maintain the identical outlet location for the footing drain in the southeast corner of the property. The Coltech units themselves are primarily designed to mitigate the increase in volume and flow. They're going to be tied into the catch basin in front of Lot 8, a little bit to your northwest there, Jamie. Previously, we were proposing having the roof leaders tying directly into that catch basin, but due to the increase in size, we're going to be routing the roof leaders from the building into the Coltech, obviously to mitigate that flow. We do have an overflow out the back to tie in at the footing drain. However, based on the sizing, that will not see any flow up to and including the 100-year storm. That's really more of an emergency overflow from the system than it is how in Lot 11 there was a splitting of flow. This system is able to address what the increase and then direct the mitigated flow rate out towards the basin, maintaining that this lot's contribution is decreased by a couple cubic feet per second on every storm. And obviously that decrease based on the design plans would allow for the basin to handle the increased size of the house. That is more or less the quick overview of this site and what we are trying to do here on Lot 8. Questions, comments, anything I can address for the commission pertaining solely to Lot 8?
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, any reason why you or the town engineer have issues with this plan?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So I did prepare a site plan, or sorry, a staff report in regards to this application, and the primary outstanding thing I had was the Regional Water Authority notifications. And then subsequent to that, we did have that violation. So I think those are the 2 big primary concerns that I think are applicable right now. I don't know, if there's any questions commissioners have, but it does maintain the limits of disturbance from the subdivision. The drainage is modified slightly, but as was indicated, it's not until the 100-year storm that the overflow would be discharged to the rear of the site, and it is discharging over 100 feet away from the wetland. I did notice on my inspection today that there were 2 areas where the silt fence along this area had failed. They were being addressed. The first one was being addressed as I left the site, and I was of the understanding that they were going to the second one once they finished up with the spot they were working on. So I guess my main concerns are giving the parties that were just noticed time to provide comments if they so choose, and then I would like to at least see that the repairs have been made and inspected prior to action being taken on this application. That being said, I don't know if the commission's okay with, once those things are being met, potentially the application being reviewed administratively, or if you want to keep it as something that you want to review at that January 9th meeting that we've continued everything else to.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Other than the RWA comments and the overriding issues that we had with the prior discussion, the agenda for January 9th is getting rather full. I guess I'm comfortable, I guess, with a agent review unless something comes out of either the RWA comments or the overall Cherry Hill plan. I don't know that it needs to come before the commission.
So I know we had at least one comment to the contrary. I believe we've lost Commissioner Boda, unless I'm mistaken.
Yes, she has left the meeting.
And I mean, it's not to say that the site will necessarily get to a point where I'm comfortable reviewing it administratively, but should they make that much progress, is the commission okay with it being reviewed administratively? I'm not willing to make that call. That's why I'm asking you guys.
This Commissioner Papantonis, given everything else with that particular subdivision, I'm just not comfortable making that decision tonight. I hate to do this. I know January 9th is a really busy meeting, but I think we still have to hold on to it.
Where's everybody else on this?
This is Commissioner Begemon. I'd be happy with agent review, but I'm also, because people are concerned, I'm happy for it to come back next time.
So we got 1, and 1.
This is Commissioner Ormrod. I'm okay with agent approval.
Let's see, Commissioner Meinson, we still have you?
Agent approval as well.
Jamie, Frederick, and the wetland agent. This is kind of a unique situation. Usually it's unanimous.
This is Commissioner Begemon. That's why I say that if there are commissioners who have concerns and want it to come back to the commission, then I'm willing to just go with that. With
Frederick and the wetland agent. I don't know that I say this very hesitantly, and I'm expecting a very quick shutdown. But would the commission potentially consider a very brief special meeting to check in and see what the status of addressing the cease and correct order is and reviewing these permits?
I hope you're sitting down.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Is there a rush for this? Otherwise, we could push it to the February meeting.
I don't think we can push it to February because we'll run out of time. So this was received, let's see. A decision has to be made by January 17th, or we have to request a continuance from the applicant. So it would have to be the January 9th meeting.
Okay, let's just Commissioner Bassman, let's play it safe, bring it back. That way we won't stub our toe if things don't go well with the overall plan and get the cart before the horse here. So I'm okay with bringing it back. But my concern was just the length of time we'll spend on January 9th. But yeah, at this point, let's see what the agenda looks like. Bring it back.
So continue to the January 9th meeting.
Yep. Application for receipt. Hopefully this one is less controversial. 241103, 191 Cherry Hill Road Extension, possible agent review. You stuck your chin out on this one, huh?
Amy Frederick and the wetland agent. So this is the same scenario. The application was just submitted shortly after our last meeting, so it is for receipt at this meeting. Since it was submitted so early, our practice is that there can be a brief presentation. I thought it might be something that could be agent approval because again, it follows the subdivision layout with the exception of minor change for stormwater swale that's already been looked at for the adjacent lot. I am assuming the same logic applies here as the last one, since it's also part of the 175 Cherry Hill Road subdivision, and the notices also went out today. Again, if we can have
Sounds
more
like a January item.
record. It's also just for receipt, so it's not actionable by the commission. It would only be something you could say could be reviewed administratively.
Commissioner Papantonis, I think we have to have the other situation under control before we do anything with this. I'm not ready to say we can do agent approval.
Seems logical based on the last discussion. Does the representative for the applicant want to add anything?
Zach Georgian and Giuliano Associates. If with the receipt, if this is being going to be held anyway to January 9th, I would just assume give the presentation next meeting.
In the interim, I do have staff reports prepared for the commission, so if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me so that the applicant can work on addressing those prior to January 9th.
Gotcha.
Continue to January 9th.
Item 6, agent approvals. We don't have any. Other business, we don't have any. Correspondence from the Kekiwik meeting. Those that went, what was the overall feeling?
It's always nice to see what other people are up to and what their problems are. And always get those little bit of tidbits of legal updates and opinions.
What about the non-legal stuff?
I did all the legal stuff. I thought it was really good, though.
Yeah, I also usually do all the legal stuff and then also jump on some of the stormwater updates as well. So there was some stuff on the new stormwater requirements and also updates or kind of an overview of impacts from the storm event that really impacted the Oxford area.
Mm-hmm. Last item under correspondence was the Connecticut land use information that I think Katie sent out.
Yes, that was sent out. Let us know if you want to attend. We'll do a last call closer to the time, but we wanted to let people know in case they wanted to save the date. That's it.
That's it. I think wish you all a happy holiday and get your rest on January 8th because it looks like the 9th is going to be a marathon.
Yeah. All right.
To everyone,
Night-night.
have a
Good night, everyone.
evening. Happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.